It was just yesterday, and we've fellowship numerous times since yesterday, and I had the opportunity to talk. The next presenter, Keith White, is the Executive Director for the National Council on Problem Gambling in the United States of America. He's based in Washington, D.C. There are offices all over the United States of America. His role is more administrative and more policy making. He gets to speak before Congress. He's been on every major news network that you can imagine, from CNN to Fox to you name it. His work is not just in the United States, but it is global. He is the foremost expert in problem gambling. From the time that he was here, and what I've learned just by picking his brain and talking to him, my knowledge of problem gambling has grown so much. And therefore, on behalf of the President of the Bahamas Christian Council, President Ranford Patterson, I am so honored to present to you at this time. I know you're not a doctor, but you should be. Dr. Keith White.
Thank you for that very, very warm welcome. And I must say that to President Patterson, that I appreciate your words earlier, but I know the warm heart of the Bahamas, that I've been welcomed everywhere we've been. And so I take absolutely no offense whatsoever, because I know the true spirit of the people. So I've been extremely blessed. It is a wonderful opportunity for me to be here and to talk about a subject that is difficult, but we believe there's a tremendous amount of hope and help. And so what I'd like to do is spend a little bit of time delving into some of the statistics that we have. And I want to be very careful to say that coming from Washington, D.C., I'm not coming here to lecture you. I'm not even coming here to tell you how to vote, because our organization is neutral on legalized gambling, so we take no position on the referendum. But it's with great humility that I want to bring some of the lessons that I've learned over the last almost 18 years in our organization for the last 40, to help you understand some of the issues in this referendum that have not been talked about as much. So with that, I'd like to proceed and first acknowledge that, that there's a big anniversary coming up here, but it's a big anniversary for my organization as well. Both the Bahamas and the National Council turned 40. And so again, I want to recognize and appreciate that, because it is fantastic to be here and to think about the progress that you've made, and to think about, again, the progress that we can all make in the future, in the next 40 years. As a nonprofit, as a non-governmental organization, we have three major principles that I'd like to just tell you about real quick. The first is advocacy. And as Pastor Fox said so well, problem gamblers don't have anyone to speak for them. When you want to talk about the poorest of the poor, the most disenfranchised, the ones that are the lowest, that's the problem gamblers with them. So one of our biggest missions is to advocate, because this is a hidden addiction. There are few outward physical signs. It's very difficult to detect. It's hard to understand. Second, we're neutral on legalized gambling. And I think it helped today and yesterday on the radio programs to say that, yes, I respect the Save Our Bahamas Coalition position on the moral issues about gambling. But we can also reinforce it with the secular issues about the healthcare policy implications of this, the government policy implications of this, the responsible gaming issues. And so as a neutral organization, we work with all stakeholders. Of course I'll be happy to go to a web shop. I'm fine talking to lottery employees. We train casino employees in the United States where it's legal. We work with everybody. We work with school teachers. We work with ministers. We work with advocates. We work with everyone. So the neutrality position is incredibly important, because it allows us to look across all these boundaries that we talk about. And finally, last but not least, services. One of the things that we believe is most important is prevention, education, and treatment. And as again, Pastor Fox said, prevention is the most ethical and economic way of dealing with addiction. Prevent it before it starts. And a lot of that, you have to do education. You have to get the word out there. You can call it public awareness, you can call it advocacy, you can call it media. Yeah, you've got to spread that word. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. The services we provide, I've alluded to a little bit. And let me tell you about one in particular that you may find interesting, as we mentioned on the show today. Our organization runs a toll-free, a free phone helpline for problem gamblers and their family members. Last year alone, we received 325,000 calls, which is just a little shy of the entire population of the Bahamas, as I understand it. Next slide. When you divide that up by the American population, it's an average of, by the time we're finished here, an average of 90 calls will have been made to our helpline. We have a responsibility, if you will, a sacred responsibility, an obligation to answer every one of those calls and to talk to those callers in distress. 70% of them are problem gamblers, but 30% are their family members. They're confused, they're baffled. They don't understand that what is recreational for some became difficult for their wife, their sister, their husband, their grandfather. They don't understand how to save in this economy when the money is just flowing right out the window. They don't understand the disease, the disorder. They don't understand why can't they just stop. I think one of the things that when I got into this field I didn't understand, I understood addiction, as the pastor said, is bringing substance into my body that caused physical changes in my brain that made it hard for me to quit. What is it that the problem gamblers ingest? The substance they abuse is money. We'll talk about that a little bit more. The substance they abuse is money. And I will tell you, there's not enough money in the world to overdose problem gambling. Our bodies evolve physical defenses over time. You drink too much, you pass out. That's your body's way of telling you, please stop. One of the members of my board of directors, who's a recovering gambler, I asked him, I said, Don, what would you do if you won all the money in the world? He said, Keith, the next person I saw, I would sit them down, give them half and gamble them for it. We'll talk about the preoccupation, we'll talk about the obsession, we'll talk about the action. But when we talk when I talk from our experience, I've been doing this for 17 and a half years. These 325,000 calls, that's how we know. I may not know the Bahamas, and I wish I did more, but I know gambling addiction. One of the things that we also know is when you talk to people, just when you put the question to them, what's your opinion? What's your perception of gambling addiction? When I say that, what do you think about it? Do you know someone? Well, you say, have you had a problem? 9%. In the United States, the average of a number of public polls, CNN, Gallup, ABC, 9% of people said, yes, I've had a problem, which is considerably more than the 2 to 3% on average that we find in the general population. 9% of people have said, I've gambled more than I can afford at some point. It's a significant number, 1 in 20, almost. A quarter of Americans have said, I've known someone, personally known someone with a gambling problem. That's a massive statistic. 1/4 of Americans personally know someone that they believe has a gambling problem. And then, to the point of the referendum here, 70% of Americans believe that legalized gambling causes people to gamble more than they can afford. I think when you just ask the question, these are the sorts of answers you get. And these are the questions I believe that you're asking, and that everyone should be asking about this referendum. So, what is problem gambling? Addiction, we throw the word around. I've got 2 definitions for you. One is very common sense and basic. If it's causing problems for you, if gambling is causing problems in your life, it's a problem. All right, we don't have to get tongue-tied and twisted. There's medical definitions, there's arguments about it, but if it's causing a problem in your life, it's a problem. And it's not just a financial problem. In fact, finances are the least problem. If you've got a serious gambling problem, you'd love it if money was your only problem. It's the depression. It's the physical consequences. The heart attacks, the strokes. It's getting involved with other risky behaviors. We'll talk about that. Substance abuse and tobacco. Those are the sorts of things. But you can define it also, and I like this definition. The second definition may help you if you haven't experienced, if you haven't met a problem gambler. You know, if you don't know, if you think, yeah, I can understand that that's an issue. I can see those folks in the web shops. They don't look like they're having fun. If it's entertainment, why isn't anybody smiling? Think about this. As I read this, think about the person, and I heard this today, spinning. Sitting in the web shop, spinning. It's progressive addiction characterized by increasing preoccupation with gambling. Because, as Pastor Fox said, no one starts out to be an addict. Of course not. It's a subtle, seductive, gradual, slippery slope. Increasing preoccupation with gambling, a need to bet more and more money more frequently, restlessness or irritability when attempting to stop, chasing your losses, which we'll talk about in a little bit, loss control manifested by the continuation of gambling in spite of serious mounting and negative consequences. Now, there's several salient things to those of you, like Pastor Fox, they're clinicians. Things like increasing preoccupation and the need to bet more and more money. Problem gamblers develop tolerance. Because one thing someone says is, well, okay, if you've got a gambling problem, why don't you just stop at $5? Because $5 doesn't achieve that same high anymore. $5 is enough. $50. Okay, that gets me going again. I can feel alive. I'm on edge. But then it's $500. It's $5,000. It's $50,000. I know people that have personally lost more than $1 million in one day. And believe me, that was not all their money, nor was it all the money they had in their pocket. This was credit, this is other people's credit. So when we look at these definitions, restlessness or irritability. What problem gamblers tell me, I think the best way they describe it, when they're not gambling, the world is gray. It's muted. Colors aren't bright. They're itchy, they're edgy. They just don't feel alive. And they don't even have to be gambling. They just have to walk back into the casino. Their heart rate increases by 30 beats a minute. The blood starts pumping, the adrenaline starts flowing. If you put them in an MRI, you can literally see the physical changes in their brain. Those pleasure and reward centers in that old reptilian brain light up. And all of a sudden, they are in the zone. They're ready to roll. They're feeling no pain. So, let's talk again a little bit past the definition. What does this really mean? Where do we go from here? This is another way to conceptualize it. This is the question that we would give those 325,000 callers to our helpline. And again, I hope it will help you get into the mind, the heart, the spirit of the addict. These three questions we've established are a very good predictor of a gambling problem. And now I am not a psychologist. I'm not a doctor, but thank you very much, Pastor Mary. I'm honored, again, to be elevated to this position. But if you're answering even yes to one, and especially to all three, come talk to me. Have you become restless or irritable when trying to stop or cut down gambling? Because many problem gamblers try. When they're not at the casino, when they're not at the web shop, when they're not at the track, they think, they're sitting there counting those ATM receipts, and they see receipt after receipt after receipt, and they're thinking, their wives are coming to them and saying, yes, we have no food on the table. Our electricity's just been cut off. Why? How have you done this? And they swear that this time is the end. They're absolutely going to stop. But if your gambling debt is twice your average entire annual income, the crazy logic of the addict says this is the only way I'm going to get it back. If that money that you've lost is still there at the table, the crazy logic of the addict says, well, I'm always one bet away from winning everything back. It'd be foolish to stop. The only way I know I've lost is when I quit, right? And persistence in everything else is a blessing. Persistence in gambling is a curse. Because the longer you gamble, the more likely you are to lose. And when you start throwing good money after bad, when you start chasing that money on the table, inevitably, you will lose over time because the odds are never in your favor. That's why it's gambling. So restlessness or irritability. The second one is probably one of the saddest ones, but have you tried to keep family, friends from knowing how much you gamble? You know, there's all those little deceits that you have. You know, honey, I'll be home in 15 minutes is my favorite one. My wife knows that's an hour, at least. But when you start, when it becomes a habitual pattern, you know, when they know you're going to be gone for a few hours, you tell them, oh, I won today. You know, I didn't lose much. You know, how much did you lose? Oh, a few dollars here and there. You know, not only are you lying to your friends and family, quite frankly, you're lying to yourself. You know, I'm going to win it. It was just bad luck. Because the more I gamble, the better I am. And of course, the better I am, the more it means I'm going to win next time. It encourages that persistence again. It's a devastating persistence. Over and over again. Because the more you lose, the more you think you're experienced, and the more you think, well, the next time I'll win it back. And that's what we learn. That's what our youth learn right now from video games. Just keep playing longer. And the better you get, the more successful you'll be. And gambling, unlike everything else in life, is exactly the opposite. The more you gamble, the more likely you are to lose, not to win. And no amount of experience overcomes the unavoidable math when the odds are against you. So the third thing, you know, did you have such financial trouble as a result of your gambling you had to get help for your living expenses? Family, friends. As I said, in the United States, problem gamblers that come into treatment, that call our helpline, that have admitted to themselves and their family that it's too much, have gambling debt alone twice their average annual income. And then there's your mortgage and your credit cards and your car and all that. Twice their average annual income. Clearly, that means a lot of them are gambling on credit. And of course, that's one of the big concerns here, is even if something does become legal, will credit be allowed? You know, how will credit be allowed? Is it being extended informally now in these web shops? Formally or informally? I mean, I think there's some significant issues there as well. So the brief biosocial gambling screen. Yes to one means there's some issues there. Yes to all three means you definitely need some help. So, what we've learned over the past 40 years is that gamblers are not all alike, just as we're all slightly, subtly different. But we know that there are two major types when you look at people with problems. The action gambler, the escape gambler. I'm the action gambler. I'm not really, but that's what it is. It's a man, well, formerly young man, usually between the ages of 18 and 24, gambles to elevate his mood. Tends to prefer games of skill. Games where I believe I'm going to beat the dealer. I'm a better poker player than you. I've studied racing. I know the different types of grass at the track. I mean, I've had people tell me this stuff. You know, I know that when it's on a wet Tuesday, a black horse always runs better. You know, I mean, I've talked to guys that have handed me this notebook, thicker than the Bible, huge notebook, and you open it up and it's just filled with numbers. And they say, I've observed this roulette wheel, and I know the pattern. Okay, it goes black, red, red, black, black, red, black, black, black. And they on it, just page to page, this repeats itself, so now I'm going to beat the wheel. You know, they believe that their skill is going to triumph. And they tend to be, I say narcissistic, big shots. You're going to win a lot of money and you're going to make everything right. I don't, you know, right now, it may seem like I'm losing a lot, but boy, when I win it big, honey, I'm going to buy you that car you've always wanted. Life is going to be good. We're going to go on that vacation. You know, it's going to be all right. I mean, absolutely, it's tough now, but I'm better than this. You know, it's going to happen because I'm more skilled. I'm smart. You know, I mean, we counsel guys that are doctors. You know, we literally had one guy in treatment who was a rocket scientist. You know, you joke and you say, oh, that guy's a rocket scientist. This guy worked at NASA. You know, and he thought he could beat the game. We see this a lot in ex-athletes. I don't know if anybody saw the news today. One of our famous football players who recently committed suicide, Junior Seau, they studied his brain and found massive brain damage from a lifetime of football concussions. What hasn't been reported is that since he retired, he lost more than $8 million at one casino company in Las Vegas in California. And that 12 hours before he killed himself, they had called in a $400,000 marker that he couldn't pay. Now I can't tell you that led directly to his death, but I know that was a part of it. And we know that the areas of the brain that were damaged were those brains that govern risk and reward decision making. But Junior Seau, when he went to the casino, he was the man. Buying everybody drinks, willing to risk it all. You know, there was no foe he wouldn't face. There was nobody that he wouldn't challenge. But when he's across that table, that green felt table, you know, he can't play football anymore, but he can sit there for 12 and 24 and 36 hours straight trying to beat that dealer. He did it. We also talk about escape gamblers. That's the other half, the women. Sarah Belafonte said women are smarter, not so much when it comes to gambling. Escape gamblers are more likely to be female. They use gambling as a narcotic. The abusive husband comes in the front door, the problem gambler goes out the back door, and goes and sits in front of that machine, which doesn't talk back to her. You can develop a relationship with that machine, with bingo, with other non-strategic forms of gambling, where it's not so much about making individual decisions, it's about seeing how long you can be on that device. It's about zoning out. Escape gamblers report, as action gamblers do, losses of time and money. But a perfect day for a female escape gambler is to walk in to the casino, web shop, whatever, with $100, and to walk out with $100. And we think, oh, that's not so bad. 12 hours later, they can sit in front of that machine as long as they can. The rest of the world tends to fade away a little bit. We know that they report not feeling pain. Literally, some of our escape gamblers will go and they'll wear adult diapers, sorry to be gross, so they don't have to get up from the machine. And they won't take their meds, A, because they may not afford it, but B, because their brain is so jazzed up on this machine, it's just they don't feel pain. Incredible, true story. A person in Australia who'd been injured in a severe car accident, shattered spine, was on a morphine drip, became a problem gambler, and would sit down at the table for 8 hours, and they could just roll that drip away. Didn't even need it. The same exact center that governs pleasure and pain also is implicated in gambling, and he was putting enough dopamine into his brain just from the action of gambling. He literally felt no pain. And would stay at that table as long as he could, because that was the sole bit of, as he would say, grace in his life. It's incredible the lengths to which people will go, especially if they faced other challenges. And I think that's one of the things that we'll turn to next, but problem gamblers, it's rarely alone. Most people that develop gambling problems have other things going on in their life. And gambling becomes, as many addictions do, a coping mechanism. It's a bad coping mechanism. It's maladaptive. But we get a lot of people that get hooked up that say, I would never do drugs. Absolutely not. I was raised that way. I mean, you wouldn't even think about it. But when my mother died, there was that loss, that void in my life. And I used to go to the casino once a month. And I put $5 in the machine. It wasn't, but after my mother died, I was just depressed. I was heartbroken. And the next time I went to that casino, put my $5 in the machine, but I realized that I wasn't thinking about her. I was starting to feel that joy again that had been absent from my life. And they came and brought me a drink. And they left me alone. and they left me alone. And when we talk to our female problem gamblers, one of the hardest things to say is, what else can we do? What are other healthy activities you can do besides gambling? And at that point, their life has been narrowed down so much that they're really stumped. They say, well, yeah, I used to go out, I used to have activities, I used to have friends, but all my friends stopped talking to me because all I want to do is go to the casino. I don't talk to my grandchildren anymore. I've narrowed my focus. So when we talk about prevalence, I believe truly that this is a universal disorder. That there's a base rate of gambling problems regardless of legality all around the world. It's just something about human nature. We are risk-taking people. And for some people, whether your brain's wired wrong or your heart or mind is, you can get in trouble. But when it is legalized and expanded, participation increases, of course, because now you're promoting it, now it's more available, now it's high speed, high stakes, it's the next new thing. And problems increase. Now, I want to be careful here, because I can't tell you how much, because the evidence in the United States and around the world is mixed. So I can't say if you have X many web shops, you'll get Y more addiction. But I can tell you that certainly, even if the prevalence, the rate of gambling problems doesn't increase, the severity of problems may well. Because you may take someone who is either at risk but not gambling, or someone who was a risky gambler currently, but it took them a lot. They had to wait till they got to the States on vacation. They had to wait till their internet connection was up to really lose a lot of money. Now it's just down the street. It was called convenience gambling, and the 1999 National Gambling Commission looked at it and said, this is a major problem. In some ways, Las Vegas was a little bit of a protective factor because he had to get there. And even at that time, there were a few people who lived in Nevada even. So it was dependent on the tourist market. People went, they lost a lot of money, but they went home. It wasn't right next door. Now, of course, the internet does bring it next door. And the more convenience gambling you have, the easier it is for those people to walk right down the street and lose that money that they were prone to do in the first place. So the other thing is that, we'll go back just one second, is that gambling is never static. I think we often think this, and it's a natural assumption that, okay, well, this will be legalized and it's going to stay that way forever. Well, what we see a lot, in the United States we have what we call now, unbelievably, jackpot fatigue. You know what jackpot fatigue is? Our lotteries can't sell a prize of less than $10 million. Our last Powerball jackpot was $550 million. So literally there are people that will say, oh, $10 million, that's not enough. 10 million is not enough? You're kidding me. But so, it used to be 5 million. When I got into the business, it was 2 million. Anything under 2 million, they said, oh, don't bother. We need to restructure the prize payout so we can have a prize of at least $2 million because that's the minimum we need for people to buy. And then it was $5 million. Now it's $10 million. You also see this constant expansion where our state governments have become those most addicted to gambling. Because now that Ohio has casinos, Pennsylvania is starting to see all these Pennsylvania license plates go across the border. So what's their response? Well, Pennsylvania will legalize casinos. And so then Ohio says, well, we'll make our casinos 24 hours. The industry cries out, screams, well, we're losing money. And schools are dependent on this. So why don't you let us do 24-hour gambling? Why don't you let us do internet gambling? Why don't you let us build another property? And so it goes and so it goes. And so we have what we're calling an arms race now. And over the last 30 years, it's gone from 2 states with gambling to only 2 states without gambling. So 48 of the 50 United States have some form of legalized gambling. And within those states, you have massive expansion to beggar thy neighbor, to beat thy neighbor. You have states that are either very practical or very cynical that say the casinos we legalize are only going to be on the borders of our state. Because we're preying on the people from the neighboring state. And then, of course, when the neighboring state legalizes casinos, what do? They've got to find another form of gambling. Because it keeps growing. Because, of course, government, and it's
true to say, it's fair to say, government is always desperate for revenue. Of course, everybody's in an economic depression. You know, and of course we need that money for good causes. But what I'm here to tell you from our experience in the United States is, it seems not to stop. It seems there's a constant demand for more and more. Loosening regulations, building new venues, going into additional forms of gambling. Because of course, once you start, well, if we already have gambling, what's the harm in adding just a few more? You know, we're already gambling on the ponies, so why don't we have a lottery? And if we have a lottery, of course, you know, what is poker really, but just a different form of lottery, and so on and so on. And so the expansion results in more expansion. We're not sure where the saturation point is. In 1995, when I started, we thought the saturation point was $25 billion. That is, that people in the United States would not lose more than $25 billion a year in gambling. Thought no one could lose that amount of money. You know, that's crazy. Then, of course, it was $50 billion a year. Anybody want to guess how much people in the United States lost last year on legalized gambling alone, leaving aside sports and poker and most of their legal things? $100 billion. $100 billion was lost. You can say the industry won $100 billion. You can also say people lost $100 billion last year alone in the United States on legalized gambling. So, what we like to say, as you can see, it's the great white shark in the lifeguard chair. You know, the man on the beach saying, you know, am I the only one that sees a conflict of interest here? Government has an obligation to protect the health and welfare of their citizens. But when they become involved in legalized gambling, they've created for themselves a conflict of interest. It is, as far as I know, the only addictive product that government owns, operates, sells, regulates, and profits from. And as we like to say, you can't minimize the benefits you can't maximize the benefits without minimizing the costs. And that becomes very hard for a politician that's just voted the lottery in, to talk about the downside, to really acknowledge that there's people that are suffering. Because he's just taking a vote on it. They don't want to see it. They're ignorant or they're indifferent to it. And that's something that, through the opportunity created by this referendum and the Save Our Bahamas Coalition, that I'm grateful to be able to be here to talk to you about. Some of these hidden costs. So, let's look at the costs a little bit more. One of the things that you may want to know is that if you want to find a problem gambler, look at employees, gaming employees, because they have approximately double the rate of gambling addiction than the population at large. And it's striking that most of our operators prohibit gambling by their employees. You can't gamble on premises. You can't get your paycheck deposited into your account at the gaming establishment and then just go ahead and use it when you get off shift. So, just something to keep in mind. It may be because people that are around gambling 24 hours a day get attracted to it. And again, there's that perception that I know it better. You know, I talk to dealers and they say, look, Keith, I just watched this guy, you know, split eights and stand on 17, and he did everything wrong, and he just lost. I know I can do better than that. You know, this doofus here didn't even know the rules and he won. You know, that could be me. Or it could be, if you're prone to have a gambling problem, what a great place to go to work. And we see that when we talk to casino employees. When I train casino employees, almost without exception, finish my presentation, you know, you're kind of milling around afterwards, you know, doing a little Q&A period, and someone will come up to me and just say, hey, you know, I'd like to talk to you a little more. You know, I don't want to lose my job, but it's getting too much. I'm surrounded by this. I can't, you know, I don't know what to do. In fact, one of the responsive gaming techniques that we use in the United States is called self-exclusion, whereby someone who has a gambling problem can go to the Gaming Commission and sign up and say, I have a gambling problem. Please exclude me from the premises. I agree that if I break this exclusion, you can prosecute me for criminal trespass. Here's my picture. Here's my signature. I have such a problem controlling myself. I want you to arrest me if you see me on property. And so this is all well and good. So we implement these self-exclusion provisions. It's going well. And the gaming commissioners come to us and say, we've got a problem. So what's that? Say, well, it's been a month now, and we've just had our first casino employees exclude themselves. But now they can't get back on property to work. So what do? These are people who aren't on the gaming floor necessarily. They clean the hotel rooms, they're dishwashers, they work in the restaurants. They had such a problem that they've excluded themselves, but now, if they show up at their jobs, they can get arrested. So it's all right, we'll work with you on that, and you guys probably need to do some training and stuff, but employees are at higher risk. What we also say is that when we look at the social costs, an easy mnemonic to remember is ABC. Occupation, Mary River. Addiction, bankruptcy, crime. ABC. Can you say it? ABC? ABC. Thank you. Everybody's still awake. It's good. I mean, when you're following such great performers, this is tough. So when you break down the ABCs, you look at 2 to 3% of adults will become addicted in the population. And that seems to be pretty consistent around the world. You look at crime, look at bankruptcy, 20% of problem gamblers report filing bankruptcy. 20%. That's a rate much higher than the average in the United States. And we think that actually that rate may be even further, because when most people file a bankruptcy petition, they say, oh, it was credit card debt or medical expenses. Well, why weren't you able to pay that? Oh, well, I lost some money in the casino. That doesn't show up on the petition, but when we talk to members of Gamblers Anonymous, they'll say roughly a fifth, one in five has filed bankruptcy directly because of their gambling. And then you look at crime. Problem gamblers will tell you almost 3/4 of them have committed a white-collar crime to finance their gambling. Now, I'm glad that most of it is not knocking people over the head, but certainly some of it is. And some of it is very sincere, if there is such a thing as a sincere crime. I'm a good gambler. I know I'm a good gambler because I've just spent 25 days learning this new blackjack system. But I just got unlucky. I couldn't believe this guy drew to an inside straight. It was impossible. I had the game beat. I put that $5,000 in. That was $25,000 that I had in my hand. I know it's great. But I can't believe I lost. Unbelievably. 1 in a million. 1 in 14 million to draw to an inside straight. That can't possibly happen again. But I'm a little low right now. So I'm going to take a little bit of money from the company books, but I'm going to pay it back tonight. I'm going to right back down to the casino. That guy's still at the table. He can't draw another straight. He can't possibly get another 4 million to 1 of this. This is really, it's borrowing. Temporarily borrowing. I'm going to pay it back, and you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to pay it back with interest. I'm going to tell the boss, someone came in and just, either we made a mistake and they gave us too much money, or there was an unsolicited donation. It's guaranteed. It's going to happen. And some of that is that crazy logic of the addict again. So we're just truly sincere. It's a financial problem. I'm not an addict. Addicts are those guys, like the instructor said, barefoot in the street, in the toilet. That's not me. I'm a professional. This is an investment. It's an investment in my future. And I just need a little bit of money to get over that hump and it'll be okay. Of course, remember, the more you gamble, the more likely you are to lose, not to win. And true gambling addicts, when they get into it, they can't walk away from that table. Because it's not about the money anymore, it's about the action. Remember our escape gamblers? It's about staying in action as long as they can, keeping spinning, don't think about everything else, don't think about the problems, keeping spinning. For the action gamblers, it's the same thing. Staying at that table, because if I just won $5,000, why couldn't I double that money? Why couldn't it be $10,000? I'm on a roll, I'm on a hot streak. And paradoxically, the more I lose, the better I get. And the more I lose, what we call a gambler's fallacy. Gambler's fallacy is actually it's a clinical term now. Basically, the more I've lost, if I believe the odds are in my favor, the more I lose means the next time I'm more likely to win. Because if I believe I've got a 55% chance of winning, and I've just lost the last 54 hands. If you're not good at math, you think, the 55th time I've got to win. It's law, it's math. Not so much. Because the dice have no memory. The coin doesn't remember the last flip. The roulette wheel doesn't remember the last, whether it's black or red. Yes, things progress to the mean over millions of spins. In fact, I could design for you a slot machine that paid back 101%. Now, who wouldn't want to gamble on a slot machine that paid back 101%? If I put in $1, I'm going to be like, well, $1.01. But wouldn't that be great? It pays that back over 5 billion spins. Even if you press that button in 2 seconds, it would take several lifetimes for you to get back 101% from that machine. You know, the math is the math. You just have to know how to interpret it correctly. So, what all this adds up to is $1,000 in America per problem gambler per year. So I've done the math for you for the Bahamas. And I've taken some liberties. It's actually $1,200 per problem gambler per year. That adds up in the United States to $7 billion in social costs per year from addiction, bankruptcy, and crime, and all the other consequences of gambling addiction. Assuming that the Bahamas is no better and no worse than the rest of the world, and that between 2 to 3% meet criteria for gambling problem today. If you do the math, it's roughly 10,000 people times $1,000 social cost, kind of rounding down a little bit. And again, this is just back of the napkin. I don't have any particular special knowledge of the Bahamas. I hope it's not this bad. I hope it's not $10 million a year in social costs. That currently is a hidden tax on the government of the people of the Bahamas from individuals who are unable to control their gambling right now. $10 million. I hope it's not that much. I fear it is. And I fear that may be the tip of the iceberg. So it's with that, it's with great humility that I want to bring to you the message from the United States. This is what we've experienced. This is what we struggle with. You know, I believe this referendum, in every event, there's an opportunity. It creates an opportunity to engage in a dialogue about this. It creates an opportunity to raise awareness. It creates an opportunity to let people know that even if you have a gambling problem, there is hope and help available. And it's one of the, I hope we'll have the opportunity to work together on helping build that safety net for you. But again, I thank you very much for your attention this late evening. I've so appreciated the warm reception and the hospitality of this wonderful country, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.